All right, good afternoon, everyone. Great, I'd like to call the meeting to order. So getting used to how to do that. We start with attendance. Right, yeah. Do a roll call. All right, this is the list I've got. Doesn't appear to be in any order, so Scott Bates. Yes. Aaron Cusker.
Here.
Mark Howell. Here. Peter Lovett.
Here.
Patrick McCurdy. Here. Linda Miller.
Here.
Elizabeth Akers Moore.
Yep, here.
Emily Rush.
She's not here.
Not here, no.
Lee Smith. Here. Okay. And John Boyd.
Here.
There you go. And me, I am here also.
Dan. Good. Okay.
Let's see if we missed something.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
Very good. We have a clerk for today's meeting.
Oh,
Thank you, Peter. And then in terms of future meetings, the next one we have scheduled will be 2 weeks from today, August 19th, from 12 to 1:30. Shannon, I don't know, if this is the right time to discuss, did we get, consensus on the Labor Day?
Yeah, the last time I checked, it was dead even for August 26th and September 9th. Those were the Monday before and the Monday after. So it doesn't ultimately matter. They were the same.
Both, so both work?
Yeah,
In other words?
yes.
Okay. Does anyone have a impact in the case for one versus the other?
Was it? Pretty good attendance for both?
Yeah, it was Tuesday, the 3rd was not.
Yeah.
Is the one that did not really work, so it was August 26th or September 9th. Both Mondays.
26 is the week school starts, so that would be my veto of that week, but that's all.
that's a good point. The counterbalance to that is, if we're gonna have our stakeholder meeting, it doesn't leave us a lot of time. So I'm inclined to sort of go for the 26th, which gives us another whack at that. If that's.
You're okay with it?
So, not no problem.
Okay.
We'll all be responsible.
No, we're still making it.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll do the 26th. So then, can we, I believe Elizabeth, you took the meeting minutes, for the last meeting.
Yeah.
And they're distributed.
Yeah.
Motion to approve with having minor corrections that surfaced during discussion.
Right. Thank you.
You need a roll call.
Is there anybody have any questions or comments on the minutes before we?
So then picking up on that last meeting.
I think we need to vote.
Oh, we have to. vote
On the minutes.
Okay, aye.
We did, I think because we're kind of, yeah, here's the list.
Sorry. Dan,
Aye, yes.
aye. Scott.
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Aaron,
Yes.
Mark,
Aye.
Peter, Linda,
Yes.
Elizabeth,
Hi.
Lee. Thank you. So then picking up on the last meeting, I'll open it up for any comments, or debrief as it relates to the zoning or rezoning, that was presented from the town council last meeting. I just, my sense was that, we had sort of pushed the pause button on, rezoning, to governmental uses. At that time, I just want to confirm that that's what people's sense of the meeting was.
Yeah, I mean, I think from what so it's currently industrial zoning,
Yeah,
so. I didn't understand if we zoned it for governmental. That we would really preclude the uses we're maybe most concerned about. So,
And most communities allow municipal uses on any zoning, and many times, so. Didn't logically make sense to me. But I'd be happy to serve on the zoning committee to sort of work through that stuff with other people.
I just have a general question about zoning. Do we go through rezoning when we don't really understand a market analysis or a master plan or what our needs are for the community? Or is it more of an overlay, sort of like a general, this can go here? I don't understand zoning very well, but it just seems like we're not sure what's going there.
it seemed like the driver for the zoning was to. Sort of put a pin in anything that might happen while we're still going through this process. But I don't know that that really would be the case based on what we were told in that call. So until we know more about what we think the zoning should be, I don't know that it makes sense to change it.
It also requires a town meeting vote, correct? Doesn't rezoning require town meeting approval?
Yes,
yes, it would.
So short of a special town meeting, okay, it's called for that purpose, we wouldn't be able to get it done until next April anyways, right?
Right.
Patrick, I was gonna suggest we might ask Elizabeth, our town planner, to weigh in on that.
Please.
Sure, the committee doesn't mind, I don't think that all could be up,
Yeah, please.
so. So the conversation regarding the rezoning to governmental use is something other communities have done. Where the land the state is giving up is a little bit, I would say, more primed for an immediate alternative use for, say, an Amazon distribution center. Some things where the community would have a really significant concern about geographically and from an impact standpoint. It is my opinion, pretty strong opinion, that is not the case for this property. It is not in a position for an immediate reuse. It is also not geographically in a position for that type of immediate use, given the rotary route to Com Ave. And also from a professional standpoint, the conversations that the community has had with DCAM, not just this committee, but Megan working with the planners at DCAM, the position the governor has taken, the immediate disposition of the property and just divesting of it is also something that I don't feel DCAM is thinking about. So rezoning to a governmental use does take town meeting. Whether it's a special town meeting now or whether a warrant article gets put on the warrant for 2025 town meeting, it does take that. The current industrial park A zone district municipal uses are permitted uses in any zone district in town, so changing it to a governmental use does not make that difference either.
What's the distinction between governmental use and municipal use?
I'm not sure, I didn't
see that particular zoning that another community adopted, so I can't per se tell you what those differences are. So the town of Concord does not have an actual municipal zoning district. So in the table of uses, a municipal use is permitted in every district. So I would have to actually read, I don't know what this municipal zoning district. And it may be a community went that route because unlike Concord, where municipal use is already permitted in every district, they may have gone that route, and that might have been the reason for that. To your question, you cannot develop zoning until you know what it is
Right.
you're zoning for. So from a visioning standpoint and a zoning standpoint, DCAM's gonna start this visioning process, go through working with this committee and the community, talk about what does the community see for their, what are some of the, absolutely not, maybe yes column uses, go through that visioning process, develop at a higher level, what I imagine is gonna be kind of a conceptual use plan where you have a little bubble over here is gonna be residential and a bubble here is gonna be mixed use and maybe something different here that we haven't thought about. They'll come up with, approximations on, given the site constraints, how you're gonna address, sewer, water. This little bubble may be between, 10 and 20 residential units, and this little bubble may be this minimum and maximum of mixed use development. And they'll lay out that conceptual plan of vision and what the community looks for. From there, you can start to develop specific zoning to make that vision a reality from a zoning perspective. Timing perspective, DCAM's gonna start this process September. Somewhere at the, I'm gonna say probably the beginning of next year, when you first, there's consensus on no, maybe, yes. Then if the town moves forward and has, a separate zoning consultant, I have, working with Megan, started drafting what that scope might look like. I do think the conversation has come up that, a different type of zoning, form-based code zoning, which works on, this is what we imagine, this is what, how we want the thing to look like from, the street perspective and parking behind buildings. And you develop zoning based on what that vision is, instead of, okay, here's the minimum, here's the maximum, you can, that's gonna be something completely new. I think at the beginning of the year, you will find the town's consultant will start that education piece, because that's gonna be a lot for people to learn. At that point, there'll be the education piece. DCAM will be finishing up, and then this consultant can start actually, going through the, the public process on developing the actual zoning to realize that vision.
So Elizabeth, it sounds like thank you for sharing that time frame. It seems like, based on what we were hoping for our town meeting next spring, that's pretty sure it might be a little bit.
You won't have zoning for.
That's what I'm saying.
Next, for 2025.
So we're,
No.
just take that off the table in terms of having a town meeting next spring,
Not for zoning.
not for zoning.
No.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, you can't develop zoning
No,
until
that's
it
right.
is,
I
you
just
know what
wanted,
zoning.
we were initially.
It is definitely possible 2026.
Yeah.
And that is gonna depend on the learning curve
Sure.
for the community in drafting the zoning. And that would be the earliest that we could see something.
Wait,
Can you speak to what might happen if a developer approached DCAM with the proposal for housing pursuant to chapter 40B in relation to the zoning that's there now, or even if we enact a new zoning next week? How a 40B proposal could work in that context?
So currently, with the issuance of the comprehensive permit for the Novo Riverside Commons project at Baker Ave. That decision has been issued, recorded. The community is in safe harbor for 18 months. If the building permit is issued during that 18-month period, then we are at safe harbor until the next decennial census, which I don't think we're gonna go below 10% even at the next decennial census. But yeah, that's, and the Board of Appeals is also reviewing another comprehensive permit, which is, I think now 234 units. That I think will probably, given the revisions have made, but will probably also be issued sometime by the end of the year. Once that decision gets issued and reported, that starts its own 18-month time clock. So if somebody were to come forward with a comprehensive permit, it would have to be termed, that's where that friendly 40B comes from. They would have to negotiate with the select board whether that project, that could even move forward. If somebody were just to submit to the state for their project eligibility letter, and did not work with the community, more than likely the community would come back and say, we are in safe harbor and, would not approve this.
Is it fair to say though that a 40B housing development could be put there before we change the zone? If it's a friendly 40B that the zoning board of appeals went along.
Well, the select board, and it would be a process, and it would have to be pretty special. If it's a comprehensive permit on an adjacent property to MCI Concord, that could move forward now regardless. The community has a lot of small comprehensive permits. Habitat for Humanity, that was a comprehensive permit. Just because we've gone above 10%, I don't see the community not wanting those types of projects to go through regardless of being at 10% or not.
Right, I think it's important for anyone paying attention to understand that could happen.
That
Before we rezone.
That can happen. Could a developer go to DCAM and say, we want to just tear down the whole entire prison and put, a 1,000-unit comprehensive permit there? I truly don't see the select board going for that, or the community. So there's comprehensive permits, can be 2 units to, thousands of units. So yes, there is a comprehensive permit could go there.
Meaning it overrides whatever existing zoning is in place, subject to the permit.
Correct. A comprehensive permit overrides all local zoning.
I was just gonna clarify, because it's zoned industrial,
Industrial Park A.
a residential property couldn't go there without going through ZBA and.
Currently, under the zoning, a residential use could not go there other than through a comprehensive permit.
Elizabeth, where are the,
We can always come in with a comprehensive permit, whatever we change it to.
Correct.
where is the second big project you referenced, one that's 233 units? Where is that one?
That's 275 Forest Ridge Road, next to the Thoreau Club.
Linda, sorry.
I was just gonna add to the original comment about forming municipal use, and I think that if we went forward down that path, it would be confusing to the community. There are some components of using this property for that. And I think it might look as if this board somehow jumped ahead and assumed that, yes, in fact, municipal use was suitable for that, and we were pursuing that as a priority. So I think it's perhaps as well best not to muddy the waters with getting into that discussion in a premature way. We don't have to.
So I agree with Linda. I think though, that we also need to recognize that there's a high likelihood that at the 2025 town meeting, we might be dealing with some kind of subdivision that involved a wastewater treatment facility becoming a municipal use. And so I think if I've been following this discussion correctly, there's nothing to preclude the town acquiring the wastewater treatment facility, putting that into municipal use within the existing zoning. And we could just do that, it could stay in industrial A, and that would be fine.
Correct.
The other comment that I wanted to make is, I think that what we've also heard over the last couple of weeks is that the Department of Corrections decommissioning work is likely at least a year. So that's past the 2025 town meeting before DCAM even potentially gets custodial responsibility for this property in the first place. So I agree that 2026 sounds like the earliest possible time when any sort of zoning would be considered. And so I think that it makes sense for us to focus on, okay, what is the visioning? How do we decide what the community really wants to do, and what does that start to look like, rather than trying to do something defensive on zoning, which I think would be distracting and almost no value at this stage.
Agree with that.
Thank you. Any other comments on the zoning or zoning conversation?
I've got just one comment. At some point, I'm not sure when we would introduce this to our process, but it would be really helpful, I think, to undertake an economic impact analysis. And I don't know who would do that, if that's us or if we engage a consultant, but if you think about this parcel, the beauty is that there are so many uses possible. We can do housing, we can do retail, there could be light industrial there could be office, there could be open space. At some point, it would be, I think, useful to begin to develop a kind of a point of view on how the economics of the whole site would work for the community. So for example, if you put in 1,000 housing units with nothing else, likely that would be quite an impact on the school system, et cetera, with probably less tax revenue coming to the town than would be the case from some commercial uses. The other extreme would be if you put in we keep using Amazon's the Amazon distribution center. If you just put in a distribution center, the town would have a ton of tax revenue without a lot of additional cost. I think we're looking for something that probably, as I said, has a variety of mixes. But as we start to think about what the mix of uses might be, it'll be really important, I think, that we have a good understanding of the economic impact of various scenarios. So I'd like to suggest we put that on our agenda at some point, whether it's now or in 6 months or whenever. We should understand the economic impact of whatever we end up recommending.
Just for what it's worth, John, it is part of our charge to do that analysis.
Yeah.
But you're right, it's an important priority. Maybe that becomes a subcommittee. Yeah, I think so. It probably becomes a subcommittee thing after too.
So from a timeline perspective, the most efficient time to begin something like that is going to be after your initial visioning process with the community, and the consensus comes up where you have no, maybe, yes, because then you can focus on the maybe and the yes. And I do believe part of DCAM's process, when they move from that point to the next point of coming up with, I'm gonna just call it the blob use map. They will also have come up with that range as far as density or square footage. And then at that point, you can have your, what do we call it? Your economic feasibility assessment go through and run, I'm gonna say scenario reports for those little blob uses.
Does DCAM do their own market analysis, or because they care about the revenues too?
I mean, it was mentioned, my recollection is that it was mentioned as
We
part
had
of it.
a list of what DCAM was
I think
Yes,
it
it's not-
does.
providing, but it wasn't, I remember
It's
being.
not in that.
I don't think
Was-
they do yeah, I don't think they do a market analysis. But I think that when they end up with those different uses, they have the development range, and then from there, an
Okay.
analysis can be done.
Who musters the community input that you mentioned to get the no, maybe?
That's all of DCAM's process with their consultant. And then, once you go through that whole visioning process, then, the town takes on the development of the zoning. And, we have our internal staff working group, working with Megan. We talked about the possibility of, the town having a consultant, a zoning consultant. But having that consultant on board, let's say, like October, and have that consultant. I don't want to say participate, because they wouldn't be an active participant, but be, involved, attending these DCAM visioning sessions. So that, they can see, from the beginning how, how the community got to consensus and what that vision is during that process. Because they'll be thinking about how the zoning gets developed. They can, periodically touch base with this group and say. So this visioning process, this right here, from a zoning perspective, could be a little bit more challenging, and you should, insert that into this visioning conversation. Because zoning would be a little bit more challenging, so have them basically be, your peer review consultant during the visioning process. That DCAM is initiating and will be guiding.
The collaboration between us and DCAM for this visioning process. It's so important. They're gonna be reaching out to the community, and we are too. I just wanna make sure we're on the same
Yep.
page and how we dovetail with them, what's our charge and what's our kind of. How much say do we actually have in this process?
The visioning process is, DCAM and their consultant may be handling this visioning, process. But the town has full control over what that vision is, because that's the input that they're taking. So, all of the input that, comes into creating that vision is from the community. It would be certainly, very challenging for DCAM and their consultant to go through this visioning process and say, okay, well, here's the vision, an Amazon distribution center, and, the community, absolutely not. So
Who's feeding DCAM this information from the community? Is it you and Megan, or is it the committee?
no, it will start with, the community. And it's, this committee.
Okay.
And, town staff.
Okay.
And it would be, something similar to how the planning board.
Right.
Goes through and
Public
does.
meetings.
Right,
Oh, yeah,
The final budget language, we actually have the signed final budget language, that's something you can circulate, I mean, I've seen the different copies, but that really lays out exactly. What meetings DCAM has to have when, with the community.
well, the minimum that DCAM has to do.
DCAM needs to have 3 meetings at a minimum. The first of those meetings has to take place within 45 days of the budget passing, which turns out to be September 12th. So Mary and I meet with Abby and Paul, and along with Megan. At least every other week. And so they're currently scheduling their first outreach meeting on the very last day of their 45-day clock, which turns out to be September 12th, which me, strikes me as how could 45 days possibly go by that fast, but it did. And so that turned, it's just the luck of when the legislature decides to get busy, but it's gonna come up very early in September from our perspective. So,
You said past September 12th, but it's 45 days of September.
so the budget was signed by the governor on whatever it was, July 29th. So if you go 45 days from July 29th, you land on September 12th, which is the last day that they can have the first of the 3 mandatory meetings. Now, in those conversations, the DCAM team is sending every message that's a bare minimum. They want to have the first meeting because the legislature says they have to have it within 45 days, but they're trying to get spun up just like we are. And the idea of this process is to come up with the joint visioning and the redevelopment planning together with it. Also written into that legislation is interaction with this group, with the advisory board representing the town and taking into account all of those stakeholders. And I think what we're going to talk about here in a minute is this, what kind of input we can have. They're building an RFP for a consultant that has to do DCAM's work, and we can be involved in that, or we can hire our own, or we can do something completely different. But that's kind of the meat of the discussion that we need to have today, is what do we think of those approaches to how do we get that information out to the community about where we are in the process. We're at the beginning. We're still figuring out what's there. The Department of Corrections still owns the site. They've got a lot of work to do to clean it up. There's some technical, the list that was shown before, that came out was the technical studies that are being done, and they're really basic. They're like, in a preliminary external environmental assessment, a survey, literally a land survey, where is the stuff? Engineering of the wastewater treatment facility, which we know is going on a different track, because also in that legislation was within 30 days, they're supposed to make an offer to the town to acquire the wastewater treatment facility. So that's even sooner than this other meeting. But we understand from them that offer is going to involve a lot of, let's call it wiggle room, contingency. So it's contingent on us completing engineering, contingent, enough contingencies to hopefully get us to all the way till next town meeting, because we have 180 days to respond to that offer. But our response doesn't have to be, we've had a town meeting and decided to buy it. So again, a very cooperative process is what's being outlined. And I think that, the question for us is, how do we want to begin to develop these ideas about what should we do with this property, and what's the experience that people have had. ULI TAP is out there as something that I know DCAM is thinking about. It's come up here. I'm assuming, this is a question now, that ULI TAP, the technical assistance program, is something that kind of runs either ahead of or in parallel with the economic assessment that John was mentioning. Yeah, and certainly way before zoning. Yeah, so, that kind of. So what are we gonna do on September 12th? The DCAM is gonna have the meeting that they're gonna have. They're gonna try to explain to the community where they are. And that's an opportunity for us, I think, to say, okay, and this is what we're doing with that information. And here's your opportunity for more engagement, really. It's the beginning of engagement.
Where are they gonna hold that meeting?
We haven't decided that yet, but there's been some recommendations that we pick a place big enough.
Yeah,
We anticipate that.
we're looking at the usual largest rooms in Concord.
Yeah, that was a great summary, Mark. I think the difficulty that we all have is that there's parallel processes going on here. And with all, I mean, we're trying to synchronize our timelines. And we're also trying to come up to speed very quickly, as you pointed out, DCAM, a whole bunch of others. So, I mean, as soon as we can get clear on looking at the charge, which is part of our work we're gonna do today. And starting to identify subcommittees to focus on some of these priorities. I think we'll feel, I imagine, just projecting my own things, I think we might all feel a little more comfortable that we're got a good handle on this.
Maybe that's a good opportunity then to transition to Mark mentioned DCAM's RFP process for kind of their project management consultant that they're looking for more about the launch. So DCAM shared with Mark and Dan and I as co-chairs a preliminary draft of the scope. They asked that it be kept confidential, but that it can be discussed for feedback.
This is like is this like a owner's rep, project manager to help them oversee everything, or is it more just community-based like organization?
The former, so like an overall project manager is how I interpret it, you know, Dan or Mark.
Is an owner's rep like we see in our business, like an owner's rep to be involved with the design, all the control consultants?
My impression was it was more cross-section of consultants, but I don't know, Mark, if you would.
Yeah. So, it was basically to drive the process of planning for the redevelopment planning. The community and stakeholder engagement, in other words, they're lead consultant for stakeholder engagement and dealing with us as well as project managing the overall process of coming up with a plan. The goal, when we talk to them, their goal is to want to be in a position in a couple of years to put out to bid for bid responses, something which is reflective of what the community wants. So that, you know, that process leads to hopefully successful redevelopment of the property according to what's been actually collected from the stakeholder engagement. So that it's really, I'd say, from now until the release of that RFP.
So it's just more clarity. I mean, this is a project manager is going to be involved from start to finish and engaging all the consultants and managing the process on behalf of the weekend. Is that correct?
That seems to be where they're headed.
And so that new entity will be working it's another entity working side by side with us.
Yeah.
Well, it's their arms and legs to get done the project, so they're hiring, just in the way we, you know, hired a consultant to help us through MBTA zoning and manage that process. That seems to be what they're doing. In the steps, so the question is, what sort of things would we want to insert in there that we want them to be sure not to miss? For example, the one I always go back to is, if you're gonna get involved in transportation, you know, in traffic planning, please think local as well as what it takes to get through on Route 2.
So Scott, maybe to bring this like out of the conceptual, like, I know this is a bit clunky, but this is how it was asked to be done. So there are 4 categories in this RFP. One is called project management. 2 is called community and stakeholder engagement. 3 is called redevelopment planning.
Yeah.
And 4 is called regulatory updates for implementation.
So these are large real estate owner rep firms that will be probably pursuing this. And they're gonna be involved throughout the whole process. And I think the most important thing is they're beholden to DCAM and not necessarily us. And I think it's important that part of the RFP is that they are incorporating and listening to us as well.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, so I think our charge is effectively, you know, coming up with an effective actionable RFP that protects and advances the town's interests.
Right, do we have a say in the writing of that RFP?
My impression is yes, it's my
So I
understanding.
think it's really important to really protect our interests.
Please. Yeah.
So to Scott's comment about, DCAM's project manager. You know, if the committee moves forward and has, your own consultant, helping with the zoning piece and that consultant is brought on board early to kind of, I'm gonna say, shadow the visioning process so that they're aware. And that's kind of your, the town's project manager is, and from the RFP, which is, way out here, if the community and DCAM, and you go forward through this visioning process and you come up with a consensus and a vision, and you have the zoning that gets developed to realize that vision. The RFP itself will have fewer possibilities if the zoning's getting developed to realize your vision.
Yeah.
So I think from, as Dan said, I think the town is going to be part of, developing that RFP, but they're not gonna be so much, what the project is gonna, entail and look like. It's gonna be more, I think, of what type of developer do we want to see? And it's gonna be less about, the actual project itself, because the zoning, the vision and the zoning should have that established already. So I think, from the RFP standpoint, it's, a developer that's, committed to doing, this type of project, in this manner, that has these credentials, that has this ability to make it happen and, isn't gonna walk away halfway through. And so a lot of those things that you can't capture in zoning, the zoning's gonna say, it's gonna somewhat look like this. It's gonna be laid out in this manner. It's gonna have these types of uses and this type of mixture. The zoning's gonna tell you what the project's going to look like. So I think that will be important to convey to DCAM in this process.
So we've heard that DCAM's gonna hire their own consultants to lay out all these elements. They're gonna hire their own consultants for current status due diligence. They wanna pick their own developer. They're gonna do all the community outreach to hear what the community wants. Not all.
I definitely don't think, so, I think of the two people at DCAM is no different than me and two senior planners in the planning division. It is not gonna happen on their own. So DCAM's doing exactly what my recommendation would be. They need help. They're hiring the people to have this project move forward because it cannot be done in-house. It is not. So yes, they are hiring people to do the assessment. They're going to hire somebody to help them do the visioning piece of it. The community outreach, it's my understanding that DCAM has a full expectation that the town of Concord will be a significant piece in that community outreach aspect. So
They're
once
gonna do their
again,
own 3 meetings. We can do as many meetings as we want theoretically, but maybe I was naive, but I thought this board would be doing a lot of those things.
oh, I think you're going to
And
be.
are we just replicating what they're doing? Are
No.
we spending money that they've already spent? So what is our role?
Yeah.
If they're doing all those things.
I think
That's
our
right,
role
Mike.
is to answer a basic question that they have, which is, what's the best way to engage with our community and what does our community want? That's our role, is to try to bring some focus into that, because they're actually actively asking us now. How do we find out what Concord wants out of this property? And I think it's up to us to try to answer that question.
But that's just a public meeting process.
But
Well, so,
there's-
sorry, it's not just a public meeting process. If you look at the chart that Linda and I put together for MBTA communities, that's not just DCAM holding 3 meetings and they
I'm not saying
know
it's
that.
limited to that, but I mean, it's shreds, it's hiring our planners, but it's, so if they're doing that, then are we doing?
But I don't
that,
think-
or are we?
Yeah, I don't think they're, what this community, and I wanna say it expects as far as the, community outreach is well beyond, just 3 meetings, and DCAM knows that. I think their, public community process will include other things, but this committee, as far as, holding, a couple of members go hold coffees, couple of members go to League of Women Voters. Their consultant is not gonna do that type of outreach.
But the other thing is, in the budget, we're not the only committee listed that they have to consult with. I don't know if anyone has that language, but, Concord Business Partnership has to be
Yeah.
consulted with, League of Women Voters, I think needs to be consulted with individually.
Yeah.
Boards needs to be consulted with, so we're not even, as far as I know, the primary, they're gonna go out to everyone. I don't know how we get to be the primary, we should, but.
I'd
To
like,
echo what
I
you're
mean, maybe
saying.
that's a large portion of this meeting, but what's our charge, what do we do?
Yeah, I'm good.
Go ahead, Mary.
Doesn't feel like we have control.
Mary, please.
Thank you. The select board wrote this charge. I would have to admit, first of all, I think the charge is slightly ambiguous. And the select board wrote this charge when we were way back at the learning curve, right? And we didn't know, we really didn't know the players, we didn't know the roles. And now that we've gone on a few weeks into this, we've come up the learning curve. It's becoming clear to me what the role of this committee is vis-a-vis DCAM. And I hear things like, well, we want to maintain control. We do have control, and we want to make sure that we get what we want. Well, to get what we want, we have to listen to the community. So our control point is zoning. And what we want, we don't know what we want yet, actually. We need to hear from the community, what do they want? And so that is our role. I could say a lot of other things, but I think we do have work to do as far as learning what the community wants, working with DCAM. I want to take the sales, I want to take the sales partnership agreement off the table, at least in the short term, because the property does not belong to Concord. It would be like us walking up to, I don't know, the people who own this building and saying, we like your building, sell it to us. We can't do that. So to take that off of the table for now and to work collaboratively with DCAM and understand that we do have control. We have to discover what the community wants, and our control point is zoning. That's my take, and I hope I wasn't too long.
I didn't think it was one. I guess I'd like to flesh out, if they have to do 3 meetings, then is there a point where it transitions to where we're organizing future meetings, or are we inviting them to meeting, or are they just like hold as many meetings as they think, which is, it's not clear to me. I mean, it's the same goal and it's the same, task, but is it just them, or do we take over at some point, or?
To your head.
Yeah, so, I think Lee's making a really good point. I think it sort of goes back to some of the conversations we've had about this being more of a partnership and making sure that our funds mesh with DCAM's funds, and we aren't, redoing the same thing, with different pots of money. So I think we need to sort of ask them how we can structure this more as a collaboration where we're each getting what we want out of it. What we're gonna want is all of that information from the community about how to further their wishes in terms of the uses for the site through rezoning, which is gonna be a big task for us to bring to town meeting. And that's gonna be on a separate path, probably in 2026, with lots and lots and lots of public meetings around that. But it's gonna be the community's wishes pushed through the meat grinder of the decant public hearings and our extensive community outreach. But, you know, I think we need to maybe have that conversation about making it more of a partnership as we go along, rather than sort of a push-pull. And I'm sort of hearing here.
I think that makes, just listening to the conversation, I think that makes a lot of sense, assuming that. Like the wishes of the Concord, the town of Concord, the decant are one and the same, right? So that like efficiency would be paramount. I guess a question would be, if this group thinks that there is value in having alternate points of view, right? So that you've got two economic. I'm not arguing for this, by the way, but I'm asking a question, is there value in having two feasibility assessments? Right, so that you have another factor, so another look at it.
I don't think that DCAM is doing economic stuff, like their goal is to get rid of the property, like. They want us involved so that we pick what we're gonna do for the long term, but they're not gonna be like, I don't think they're concerned about like, what is the economic impact in the way that we are.
No, I think sorry.
That's,
I think it kind of comes back to the point that Elizabeth was making earlier, this bubble, I like a bubble use diagram, kind of that idea. And then applying your point, some economic analysis.
Into that forecast, the bubble areas.
Yeah, and then at that point, we then can come to the table and say, this is this collection, to Mary's point, this is the collection of uses that we'd love to see here. And this is, and it supports what we need economically in the town. And I think that's.
You can't try to get, it sounds like the sales partnership is sort of a train to station on that one, so, you know, that's what it is, but. It seems like DCAM, they're trying to maximize their dollars from the site. True?
I don't think that's necessarily true, Scott.
They've actually
They said
pretty
something,
much said the exact opposite of that.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
not really a goal.
Okay.
and in my understanding. Limited understanding of the sales partnership is admittedly, is that it's a blunt instrument that usually comes into play when things break down. And so I think what we are trying to do is to work with them and come up, as I said, with an RFP that really captures everything that we've heard. And the town is capital T and lowercase t, that makes, I got that right, right?
So you have, sorry, keep talking. You have all these lists of all these consultants that this project manager is gonna go out to retain, DCAM's gonna manage. We have our budget. I'm just not sure what's in DCAM's bucket and what's in our bucket to spend. Are we just spending money on a community services facilitator, or as Aaron's not really gonna do any other studies, or? I don't understand what's in our bucket, which is the DCAM just keeps on going forward. We're moving very fast, bringing on consultants, doing RFPs. I'm not sure what's in our bucket.
Good. To give you an idea as far as starting now, the visioning, DCAM has a minimum of 3 meetings. They have all these other stakeholders that, Elizabeth lined up that, they have to meet with. But, this committee, similar to, between 2016 and 18, when the town was updating the Envision Concord long-range plan. The consultant we have, there may be, other things. They did a text message campaign. They had little signs, and so what are your thoughts about this? And people could submit text, message answers. They had an interactive web page where people could drop pins and ideas, and that may be something, an additional form of community outreach that this committee wants to add to what DCAM does to get more, diversity in comments and I don't think DCAM's, I haven't heard them say, but they may not do a community-wide survey. Maybe that's something that this committee wants to take on to help broaden that conversation. That's how I think during the visioning process, this committee would work.
Can I just respond to Scott's point? I think that there's, Mary made the comment that our control point is zoning. I would add our control point is also, in my opinion,
The visioning.
the visioning and
Okay.
as through the RFP process. Now, that's really our control point,
Yes,
right?
through the developer RFP.
Correct.
Yes.
And so, to your point, DCAM's generating a whole bunch of really important information. We could look at something, I can't even give you an example right now, but you can imagine, we could look at something and say, no way. Right?
Yeah.
Because it's just too, right, or too significant a concern. And so I think that's our.
Is that someone we retain, a consultant?
We may have to start, depending upon the complexity, whether it's a wastewater treatment or whether it's a hazardous waste or some other.
But before you get there, you've already had the whole community visioning where the no column has already been developed. So DCAM's not gonna issue a build or RFP and choose things that the community already through the visioning process
Right, and
took out.
to the last meeting, which I don't think you were here. Were you here? Well, it was Alan's, which is Alan and Elizabeth. We're gonna hear from the municipality about what our needs. So I feel pretty comfortable that we're gonna be able to say no, or to your no's or whatever it is.
You're saying that the money we're spending is probably gonna be on the visioning, maybe it's a consultant, and also the zoning.
Yeah, and perhaps if we wanna do deep, like there's gonna be a lot of work on the wastewater treatment piece, right? So whatever, if there's an item there that we have to do a
So
little
who's
deeper
doing
dive.
that, like, if we're buying wastewater, who's putting up DCAM's gonna give us a price for it. Who's checking on their behalf for that, that's it,
Well, Weston Sampson right now is involved.
but they're hired by DCAM.
No,
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Weston
It's a good question.
Sampson did the, however many years ago, the comprehensive wastewater planning study. And, they are the town's consultants.
It's great.
So I just wanted to sort of try and summarize what I thought I've heard. In terms of the studies that the town needs. We've talked about how, zoning consultant to sort of educate people about form-based codes. We've talked about the need for an economic impact analysis. We've talked about the ULA TAP process and helping with that big visioning component, yes or no? I don't know how that's gonna reach, and then maybe additional outreach. And I just heard the wastewater treatment facility, but isn't that already hired?
That's happening already.
All right, so we don't need that.
That's a great list.
And they're doing transportation, traffic and transportation is doing that.
So that's still a question.
Yeah.
I think we should think through how to communicate to the general public. What we're asking them for and what our interest is versus what DCAM is doing. That may be the exact same question. But just so the public, if literally DCAM asks the same question to the public that we do, they should understand who is this question coming from and what is their interest, and I don't know. You got to think through what that is, but I think we need to be able to distinguish between those two.
We got a question here.
I'm not sure there's a distinction though. That's to Peter's point. I don't think there is a distinction. I think, I think DCAM and this committee, as you go through the visioning process,
Well,
should be,
I'll give you
Working
an
to the same
example.
goal.
The DCAM's interest is the state, our interest is the town, and they may end up in the same place, but.
Yeah.
Those can be divergent interests.
they can be.
Who's paying for the West Concord advisory?
We're gonna put that.
Please go ahead.
Don Kepke from, I think one big distinction between this committee and DCAM is we represent the taxpayers of this community. And so I want to pick up on John's earlier point, and I think an economic analysis that looks at the cost and net income of various ideas, and even within the scale. So at 100 unit housing versus 400 units housing may have huge cost impact on this community. And that needs to be, I think, given to the community as part of the visioning process in advance. Because people, by and large, don't know, right? They may come in and say more is better, and not realizing that that triggers another $100 million school building. So we need to be on top of that. I think that's something we can interject into the dialogue.
Is it possible going into these outreach meetings that haven't happened yet, DCAM seemed open to a collaboration, can we present together or pursue this in a way that we're together from the start, and then it's less of a DCAM's meetings and Concord's meetings?
Should be together.
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely. So, in their this draft RFP here, there is a section on visioning. It's incorporate community input, review concepts from national precedents and ULI, produce and validate high-level vision concepts, and translate agreed upon into principles to inform planning. So, again, quite broad. It does feel like,
But that's gonna be some real estate, Boston real estate, New York real estate company coming into Concord and running a meeting that they don't even know Concord. So I agree with Aaron's point. If we could be at the table with him, it'd be great.
yeah, and to Mary's earlier point, I think the discussion we wanted to have today in terms of our kind of scope, I think it does come into focus a bit, and visioning is probably. Now, back to my earlier comment, I do wonder about, how much of a fact base we need to generate to inform that visioning process, if we're going to, right, to the point that was made earlier, even kind of high level, scenarios of, to John's point, 1,000 units, this is the economic profile. I don't think we need it down to the 10 or 10 level of detail.
That's why,
But scenario A, B, and C, this is kind of the flavor of the economic.
to protect our interest in like early visioning, I highly recommend. Getting in, ULI for this tab, because it will give us a sense. The marketability, visioning, all that information you get, the economics, the design, the layout, everything, you get it in like a very short time, one day. And to have that information in hand before we wait for DCAM, I think it'd be great for our committee to have that information in front of us.
So can I just make a point that the ULI process, it's a 1 day type process that gives you a very high level, outlook on things. I think the collaborative approach with DCAM, you're gonna get more community involvement. You're going to get something that is, at a more specific scale that this community expects and wants to be a part of. And I think the collaborative approach with DCAM and supplementing what they're going through, you're gonna end up having something that is going to be more precise and involved than, a 1 day charrette from.
Well, I just think the 1 day shred is not something we're gonna end up using. It's just something, it educates us on what's available. It just gives us the tools and the language and understanding, especially from the market to the master planning to what could possibly those bubbles could be. And we'll let the DCAM and our process go forward, but we're not gonna hold on to.
My only concern, it's kind of like when how many times do you drive past Middlesex Bank? You get sign blind. There's so much going on in this community that to have a 1 day visioning charrette and then to have additional DCAM and this committee involved, people are going, I thought I just did that. Isn't that what I just went through? And I I think, if this was more of a very adversarial position between the state and DCAM and the town. And they're gonna say, no, we're issuing an RFP for the Amazon Center, it fits in your current zoning. Then I think you're looking at a different scenario, but I do really worry about that. And this is gonna be a lot for the community to take on.
So we're gonna end up going through this process and come up with, you know, some potential uses, and then we'll hire or we'll have on board at that point a fiscal impact analysis consultant to go through all of those things for us. I mean, I think we want that information.
I think there's also several levels of ULI tap that's available. All the way up to like a 4 or 5 day workshop, and what I've heard is an interest in trying to go for something that's more like 2 or 3 days. That would allow the opportunity to engage some of the national, because there's not that many prisons that have been redeveloped, so. Casting a net to the people that have looked at things like Rikers Island and other places will get more. You know, useful input out of that, and I know that Emily was interested in this, and so having that conversation both with ULI from this group to understand that, and then. Negotiate, you know, understanding who's gonna hire ULI, is it gonna be the town, is it gonna be DCAM, is it gonna be some kind of joint RFP, those are all options that are on the table right now. We're trying to decide what's the most useful version of that engagement. It might take place, because I do agree with Elizabeth, you know, some kind of 1 day. You know, dot thing where you try to repeat the same information is probably not gonna be as useful as something that's a little bit deeper. I guess, you know, reflecting on a little bit of how this conversation is going to, I see the role of this group as being the, you know, the real focus. Expertise, I mean, you guys were recruited to this group because you all bring some experience. A lot of detailed knowledge about the community and the ability to help focus the community groups on this effort so that the work product is good. And so I'm, you know, more interested in seeing how we as the advisory board really dig into each step of this and sort of check it along the way to make sure that it's a valid step, that it's eliciting useful, fact-based information, and the community outreach is actually working. I think that if we adopt those kinds of ideas and said, we're gonna just make sure that as this process moves ahead, it never gets a life of its own, and it's always informed by what we see from the ground in the community. I think that's our best option to move ahead in that partnership.
So as a segue.
Yeah.
To that, we had sort of intended to spend a little bit of time talking about governance and organizing our efforts in terms of subcommittees, and I wonder if now is after that. I think the conversation is great, because we're starting to get some of the concerns that people have out on the table.
Perfect. Shannon, can I share a screen?
Yeah, you should be able to, you should have permission.
Yes.
So are we not getting a town staff update?
I don't see Meg.
Megan gave me her notes.
Oh, okay, so
So I can do it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, real quick, because honestly, a lot of this has been covered, just that Public Works is continuing to work with Weston and Sampson to analyze and study the wastewater treatment plant. There was a staff meeting with DCAM to discuss our scope of work and to also discuss the DCAM effort to onboard an engineering evaluation of the wastewater treatment plant and on-site utilities. We are in the early stages of discussing a technical joint meeting so that our engineering teams can share information. And then Mark already covered some of this, but how DCAM is required to make an offer to the town regarding the treatment plant within 30 days of the signed budget. The town will have an additional 180 days to respond to the offer. And the goal is not to have a full agreement in place by the end of the 180 days, but to agree to begin to negotiate on a real estate agreement. Town staff is drafting the scope of work for a zoning consultant. This technical expert would work with the advisory board, attend the DCAM visioning process, and assist with the technical drafting of the zoning base on the vision. And town staff is working with DCAM to prepare for their first public hearing, which can take place no later than September 12th, according to the legislation. We are working to secure a date and location, and we will be working with DCAM on the meeting logistics program and advertising of the meeting. As soon as the date and location are secured, we will share that.
Be great to see the possibility if it's appropriate to see that RFP, just to understand the kind of.
For the zoning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
One narrow question, what was the final amount of money that was given to the town?
It was 475.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
Zoom way in here. Okay, so Dan and I put our heads together to just think about how do we begin to chunk up the work to be done by this committee. Now, the ground is shifting underneath us.
It's not like we're doing anything.
So I don't think we're gonna answer this fully today, but we can share this kind of with the minutes coming out of here. But would love, you know, folks to weigh in live as to think about how we break this down, number one. And or refine this list. And then two, how we think about starting to put our names against each one of these. And also from there, the next step would be, how do we think kind of about what each of these bullets or subcommittees would entail? Right, kind of what are the objectives of each, what are the major milestones along the way? Et cetera.
I actually think your question is good, Lee. I think not because we didn't, when we were doing this, we didn't have the benefit of this conversation, but it's almost like a fundamental question, what are we doing? But that's all that work's still gonna be going on. And the question is, do we wanna be in, different groups, but the question is, do we wanna be in reaction mode? Or do we wanna try to get out in front of it? And I think, Patrick's made the point about coordinating the DCAM and our approach.
Third possibility is that we're participating with DCAM at each step that they're doing, and maybe we're not at the table per se, but we at least have representatives at everything they invite the public to.
Yeah. Yes, and I don't have the answer for that today, but I think it's not gonna come from me anyway, it's gonna come from all of us, but plus some input with the town staff. You know, what things do we really need to be paying close attention to, and what things, I don't know that any of us are particularly in a position or I think we're interested in the results, but I don't think we're gonna sit there and watch an environmental study and say, do expect.
Yeah, it felt like to me, today's conversation was around how do we make sure that the town is kind of educated as DCAM goes through this process. That's kind of what I took away from today. So how do we help enable that so that as they do their official meet grinder, it's called, they're only gonna do 3 sessions, they're gonna do some sort of digital engagement. How do we bring the town along so that they're informed and they know what's coming? And they know how to think about the choices that DCAM is gonna put in front of them.
We're not gonna, we have to be doing that simultaneously, or else this committee will have no credibility if they're going off on our own, DCAM's doing their own thing. Because they know that DCAM's running the same.
That's exactly what I mean. So then afterward, we're to the point on the Middlesex back. Right?
I just wanna try to put a very positive but authentic spin on this. I think what's going on right here today is precisely what we're supposed to be doing. It's all these different viewpoints of the town expressing concern about. And I think to your point, Patrick, and other people have said this. Imagine going into a meeting and with all those different folks with their own set of concerns. It's taken us 4 weeks, more longer, 4 meetings just to get to a point of decent understanding, and there's still so many questions. So it could just really easily set people off in terms of concerns if we don't sort of set them up, for understanding. So
Dan, can I just add to that a little bit? It's interesting. I agree, just watching the conversation today. What I'm seeing is like, let's call it like healthy skepticism about the role that this committee is going to play. And I think at the end of the day, I'll speak for myself, DCAM is going to control this site for a few more years. And then it's going to be Concord's to live with for another 500 years, right? And I think I can imagine that when the legislation is being put together, it's hard to anticipate what kind of a committee a town/partner might put forward for a project like this, right? What we know in this group is that Concord is exceptionally involved, engaged, and is going to be very active. And I think the nice thing is that we have put together a committee, the select board in their kind of eminent wisdom, with people who are highly qualified, very interested and ready to really put a shoulder to the wheel, right? So we want to be actively involved, and we want to be sure that we are, I'm going to say, kind of an equal partner of DCAM, and not just one of the committees that DCAM is obligated to, to talk to, right? So I think we want to be sure that we are central to the process. I think we want to be sure that that we have that direct voice, and I think that we shouldn't. I think we should be okay. Like Mary made the comment. I hope I'm not being too blunt. I don't want to be too blunt here, but I think that this kind of trust takes a while to build up. I think the DCAM has been a great communicator so far. As I say, there's a little concern that, well, geez, ultimately they're kind of acting at the direction of the Commonwealth, which is not necessarily aligned with Concord's long-term interests. But I do think that this kind of conversation is really helpful. And I think as we go through the charge, let's just be sure that we are, at the table every time there are decisions to be made and have the right to be there.
Please.
Hi, my name is Peter Paul from Woodbridge Street. I'm looking at my watch, I was saying, 1:30 duration there, just wanted to know if I have a public comment at this point, but
I think
the original stated we were gonna be wrapped up at 1:30, just didn't like there, all those comments available.
Yeah, I think we're gonna do it. We'll do it in 5 minutes.
Very
That's all
good,
right.
thank you, sir.
Yeah, of course. So maybe we'll do two things. We'll share this around with the minutes, unless there's any quick live reaction that we can incorporate. And I'm happy to also include a line on kind of what is the objective of our committee, so that you all can start to weigh in and refine it, so that we get really crisp on today's discussion, and how do we think about what our scope is, especially vis-a-vis DCAM. Okay.
Yeah, and when you think, can I just add a couple of ideas when you're thinking about that? Think about, hopefully this is helpful, think about what defines your individual current reality, and think about the goal, our future desired goal. Those two. So I think it's really helpful for each of us to understand where people are entering into this when you're sharing this stuff. So that, if that's helpful, it's sort of resonated with me.
Well, I'll volunteer for the zoning committee.
All right, good. Looking at future meetings, I think we already handled the most important order of business, which was confirming that Labor Day reschedule, so that will be, it was the 26th, that Monday, before Labor Day. I won't comment on the others, it's in the minutes in terms of other, the agenda items that are upcoming. Any questions on, future meetings?
How are we going to provide input to DCAM so that the September 12th meeting is a shared meeting? And it's not just their meeting, I think we need to put our stand on it too.
We have to ask them,
They're way more than open to that. I think they would welcome it if we wanted to just say what role we want to have and take that role on. You know,
An agenda item for our next meeting.
yeah, I think it should be the discussion. You know, some of the input that I provided, to them about this meeting is to really try and ground us in where we are. Try and discover, indicate to the community that. What do people really want to know about this? When will DCAM come back and what will they come back? They're not gonna have this consultant on board. They're just, I think that those of us that have done anything at all in the commercial sector. Will have trouble understanding the rate at which this is going to take place, because it's just moving, it reminds me of that old joke, what does the snail say on the back of a turtle? It's that kind of pace, and so, we almost need to gear down to it, but I think that creates the opportunities that John was just talking about. Of really staying engaged, really staying focused, and making sure that the community knows where this is, which is just getting started. And then, what kind of. So I think they're here mostly to introduce themselves to the community and to provide some kind of an outline. And I think it's a really good that we've had this discussion, because we probably need another meeting to talk about, okay. But given that framework, this is what your advisory board is doing for you, Town of Concord. That's the basic message that I would propose that we should be trying to deliver.
Which we have to figure out.
Which we need to, bird dogging the process is a valid answer at this stage of the game.
It feels to me like we probably should also be thinking about how often are we engaging with DCAM and just making it more recurring than episodic, given this. And the other is if one of our primary charges is really gonna be community engagement. Should think about, as we think about our consultants, like how we're thinking about our communications agency or professional. Okay, if nothing else, we open up for public comment.
Thank you. Thank you for assembling your volunteer work, appreciate it on the 30 years. I've quoted volunteer capacity also, so I'm sure half is a little more involved. I live on Winthrop Street, which is probably the closest to the butter to this property is this, but I think it's a new thing. And his project that was going to be top construction. I don't know if you can answer this specifically, but it was recommended by Simon Catala, our representative, that I put it forth to you folks to hold and keep it on the tip of your tongue. That would be the access to this parcel. In the past, and Lee, I think will correct me if I'm wrong, but they tried hard to work with the board. What liable person to have an alternative access. To their 12-acre volunteer. Everybody familiar with that 12-acre volunteer? I think it's an ideal time to perhaps explore an alternative to that. Because in this case, it would go down Winthrop Street, which is a 4-house residential street with low volumes of traffic. And it will in fact, if that access is being maintained, it would in fact cross over the bike path, which is extremely popular in that section, right outside of the parking area. So if I could just put that thought to your time. Again, I know it's maybe early for specifics, but I think as in my discussion with Simon Catala, the rep, he seems to have a pretty good pulse on what the state hopes to do for the program work here. And I think that's probably going to be the first shovel in the ground before any, even if zoning work takes place here with you folks. Don't change, especially the groceries are going to be for the particular access to this property is going to be the preeminent topic here. Certainly first in the line is order of appearance. Again, it's not like you're going to have multiple hearings in your work. Open up to the public, which keep that access in mind. So large parcel, I think it needs a dedicated access, perhaps down on walls.
Thanks, Peter. Yes, Carol Savoy.
Yeah, hi, Carol Savoy, 61 Belknap Street. I just wanted to understand in regards to the possibility of moving to form-based code zoning. Is that going to be specific just to MCI? Or is that going to be a townwide, new zoning, I guess, way of zoning? And the reason I ask that is, it's significantly different from what we have today, and that's a much bigger project. So I was just trying to understand, is this form-based code limited to MCI or is that townwide?
Limited to MCI.
Great, thank you.
Vince Carlson.
I had a question on Junction Village. Where does that stand in the timeline with the current proposal there?
So I'm the chair of Concord Housing Development Corporation, which is the owner of that 12.8 acre parcel. Right when the announcement was made that the prison was closing, CHDC had already put out a request for proposals for new development there. And as soon as that news broke, we decided to pause that RFP, which is good through September 30th. We're actually meeting tomorrow morning. And I'm personally going to recommend that we continue that pause indefinitely, because it makes, to me, perfect sense to include that 12.8 acres in the analysis of the larger prison parcel. But I'm only one member of the committee, but that's my view.
I just noticed that that development has been under consideration now for between 8 and 10 years. And, that's when the original RFP went out, somewhere between 8 and 10 years ago. Christopher Heiss got canceled for, various reasons, but, it seems like extending that again is kind of a long development cycle.
It's a good thing we fast tracked it. If I may though, that brings up one example of someplace where we might make independent expenditures or, add context, and because it may turn out, and I think this is something that we could now look at, now that language has actually been passed, that the restrictions on the funding that the state had may be applicable only to studies, for example, of the actual MCI property. And since this isn't part of that, this is where town funds, there's some discussion about ARPA or other town funds might actually need to be come in place, and we might need to sponsor that because some of these adjacencies, like the Junction Village property, really do need to be incorporated in that. And so expanding that scope to include the context is important for us to do.
Thanks. Just one other question, another topic on the visioning process. Please don't forget, Envision 2030, which of course is the current 10-year plan, although Envision again is aspirational, and there are certainly some things, since we're midway in the process now, and the Earth has gone around the sun 5 times, that it should be also considered that there's another part to this, and it's the master plan, since the vision is aspirational only, but really a comprehensive master plan is, what's in order. And when I listen to that discussion, it sounds like the two are getting interchanged a little bit there.
Thanks, Vince.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, recapping a couple of actions, quickly, suggested that, our plan for engaging with DCAM ahead of September 12th be added to next week's agenda. We'll like to do that. The subcommittee structure, draft subcommittee structure will be reviewed, along with the minutes, and then I would suggest that we also find out about what of the DCAM consultant RFP can be shared with this group as well.
Which one other thing I think would be worth on the agenda about the consultant to help us with the outreach.
Okay, with that, may I move to adjourn? Yeah. Move to adjourn, please.
Second.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.